cold steel floors, warriors of forgotten lore. Gods of war and elder kings, titan falls and chaos reigns. Every world a battleground, the echoes of lost souls resound. Warmaster leads with burning light. Into the fray we ride tonight. Stories told of ancient might, epic glory in our sight. Orks fall back when he's in sight. Elder flee into the night, but to his foes he's the pain. In this universe of pain. In the warp where shadows creep, ancient evils never sleep. Astartes rise with Golda's voice. In the Emperor's name their praise. Warmaster leads with burning light. Into the fray we ride tonight. Stories told of ancient might, epic glory in our sight. Those fall back when he's in sight. Elder flee into the night, but to his foes he's the pain. In this universe of pain. In this universe of pain. In the warp where shadows creep, ancient evils never sleep. Astartes rise with Golda's poise. In the Emperor's name their praise. Warhammer looms beneath the sand, awaken to reclaim their land. Tyranny swarms stuck in the sky, only the strong will survive. From terror's throne to distant stars, the galaxy burns with endless stars. Wonder sails etched into the void, the Warmaster's name, worlds are destroyed.
Hello and welcome to another lore stream. It is I, the Warmaster, putting on the mask of Loreman this evening to talk to you about definitely the only species in the 40k universe that actually enjoys living in the 40k universe. I mean, I guess you could make a case for the Tyranids, but I don't think they experience enjoyment because it's a hive mind kind of deal. So, yeah, pretty confident in that. Anyway, as I was saying, I'm talking about orcs. So let's start with the basics. Orcs are these big green idiots that you're seeing passing through the screen here. And they're, generally speaking, they come into the height of like a regular guy. Like they're about the size of the height of a man. But they'd be taller, except, as you can see, they kind of hunch over a lot. And here, he looks huge. He's probably a knob. Anyway. As I was saying, orcs in the 40k universe actually love living there because it's a universe of endless war, and guess what? Orcs love fighting. Like, that's their big thing, is just fighting. That's all. That's what they like to do. That's how they solve all their problems in society. Like, any dispute that pops up with orcs, they fight it out, and whoever wins is right. But I'll get a little bit more into that here in a bit. But yeah, really, they're very barbaric. They're very savage. Everything that they use looks like it was made out of a scrapyard, because it basically was. And they're big, muscular, green dudes, and they're super strong at a base level. I think it depends on their size. I don't think just naturally orcs are as strong as Space Marines in armor. I don't think that's the case. I think it's usually you'll see like knobs that are that strong. But in terms against like a regular, poor Imperial Guard trooper, these guys are so strong after a while, like, they don't necessarily care that much about an edge on a weapon. Like, it just gets so large and they're so strong that through sheer force, it'll just, destroy everything. Not everything, but, cut a guardsman in half without really trying all that hard. So, Yeah, 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 big guys. Although, kind of like a subspecies of orcs are the Gretchen. They're shorter. They're like, I think they're described as tall as an adolescent human or like a teenager. I think, if I'm remembering right. They're really, yeah, and they're like thin, kind of scraggly looking dudes. And they're not super durable. Like they're not like the orcs, like the full size orcs that can like, you know, have an arm chopped off and then they just go to whoever who stitches it back on and a little bit of spit, a little bit of grit, and they're fine. Gretchen are a lot weaker, and they also like, yeah, orcs don't necessarily care about their well-being all that much. A little bit, but not sort of. Anyway, they do have like larger heads, kind of bulbous, and then they have wide ears and large noses. So Gretchen actually have like a crazy good sense of smell and hearing, and they have better dark vision than regular orcs and people. On top of that, which is kind of interesting. I didn't know that last part. Or no, it was the no, yeah, I think it was the dark vision. I didn't realize that was a thing. Oh, well, wrong universe, whatever. I mean, like generally speaking, Gretchen are so weak that like you put a Gretchen up against a guardsman, say hand to hand, and that guardsman's probably going to win. But because of that, they roam in packs, like pretty large packs, usually under like the guidance of like a big orc, like a full size orc. I forgot what they're called. I think I talk about them later. Shit, I don't remember. Anyway, I have it in here somewhere. But yeah, they usually will have. Hey, Quill, it's good to see you. Yes, we're discussing orcs today. I was just talking about how Gretchen, the little, they're the 40k equivalent of goblins, except they're actually like a subspecies of orc. Like, yeah, the orc biology is crazy. I love it. Which is the next section, but let's see. Yeah, so they have like these basically little knives of like scrap metal, and then they'll just like, even in terms of like orc weaponry, they will have even lower quality like little guns, and they scavenge ammo and they use it, and they'll move across the battlefield in these swarms, just trying to overwhelm and kill things, and it's fantastic. They're also like extremely self-serving and kind of cowardly, so that's why they have to have orcs, like full-size orcs, telling them what to do constantly, because if like on the battlefield anyway, because if you don't, they can and will essentially pussy out and run away. So yeah. Let's see. They So like gobos in D&D. Yeah, essentially, yeah. They're little. They're also like a servant race, like almost a slave class, but they're like fine with it. When I talk about Orc Society, I'll tell you about that. But it's yeah, they're treated like shit and they're fine with it. Like they're just like, all right, whatever. So there's another subspecies that I thought it was anyway. They're referred to as snotlings, but some things say that they're just like younger Gretchen, and then other things say that they are a subspecies in and of themselves, because they're basically, all they do is tend to the fungus fields that grow up around orc settlements, because it's all fucking fungus. But yeah, just like around orc settlements, they'll have these huge patches of fungus, and these snotlings will go out there and tend to them. Like they'll pick it and bring it in for them to eat or to turn into booze, which that's what Gretchen do that. Or they'll apparently make medicine out of it. Although with the descriptions, what I know of Mad Docs and Pain Boys, I am doubtful they even use medicine. I don't know. Oh no, those are runt herds. Those are the guys. So they're apparently um, orcs. They're kind of like specialists. I call them specialists, but they're like basically they're just like what this particular orc happens to be good at. And in this case, they're called runt herds, and they basically are these really shitty, mean. Yeah, sorry about that, Sky. It's how Twitch does stuff. Well, I'm not super big into revenue. It is nice to get, so I apologize for the annoyance. But they only run, I think, every half an hour. Anyway, so yeah, so snotlings are usually they're run by runt herds, and actually really fun. At one point, they were used as ammunition for this this orc weapon called a shock attack gun, which, if I'm remembering right, is it basically creates a tunnel through the warp, and it shoots these snotlings out with, I think they have like bombs or something strapped to them, and it's crazy. It's great, and that's like aside from just like a gun with a bunch of that thing. Aside from a gun with just an F ton of barrels on it or whatever else they can strap to these things, orcs have some of just the most off the wall weaponry, and I adore them for it. And yeah, probably the single biggest thing that really like just the nothings themselves. Well, I might be Was it just the snotlings themselves? I don't remember. You're probably right. I thought they exploded or something. Maybe it was just from like the sheer speed of like they get accelerated through the warp. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, but I mean they're firing like baby Gretchen as ammunition, or if they're a subspecies or whatever. Now what's really fun is squigs are actually a subspecies of orc. Like the whole orc biology is crazy, and they essentially Gretchen they're goblins, like the goblins I was just talking about. They're basically the servant class. Bomb, I think, would explode. Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. They're effectively goblins, but they're like a servant slave class for the orcs, and yeah, they're funny little guys. They actually have their own. No, you're fine. You're fine. Um. Anyway, so yeah, squigs. They're a subspecies of orcs because their whole like they can create a self-sustaining ecosystem because they'll when they release spores, aside from creating more orcs, they like it can be just these fungus that they live off of. It can turn into a squig. It can turn into a Gretchen. It can turn into a snotling. Like it's it's crazy. And so then you have these squigs. So there's a ton of different, and there's a bunch of variations of squigs. Some of which I knew about. Some of which I was like, really? That's nuts. So they use them for a food source, obviously. They will use them as mounts, and they will use them as attack dogs, which they call face biters. And they're bipedal mouths that move really fast. I thought I had one in circulation. Let me find one here real quick. I can pump it in there. Let's see. I don't know who did this artwork, but it's pretty good. I think it's official. Here, let me slap it in there real fast. Let's see. It should be in there now. Where is he? Where are you, you little... Nope, it's not going to show up this time. Alright, hold on. Let's see. Here, close that out. Where'd he go? There he is. Let's see if that comes up. It should pop up, I believe, as long as OBS decides to be nice to me, which it doesn't look like it will be. So, one moment. Oh, don't you dare do this to me. See if I can. There it goes. All right. So that is a squig. It should be showing now. It took a second. I had to put it on the slideshow, and then I just remembered I could pause it. Yeah, they're pretty crazy looking, and they're effectively, like I said, they're literally mouths on legs. And I just, they're great. And they come in, like, literally little, like, think Chihuahua sized, all the way up to, like, elephants, like, huge, like, almost fucking Titanic in size. They're huge. Those are called squigoths, which I will also find an art of. Let's see. There's a good one with good perspective I can find real quick. But yeah, there's squigs also come in a wide variety of forms, and they even have ones that are like functional. Like there's oil squigs, which I didn't even know was a thing until I was like really diving deep into this over the last week, just to refresh my memory and kind of learn some more stuff myself. That's the other side of this too. I'm not finding a good one with perspective. Which sucks. Oh wait, no, that's not. That is fan art, and I don't want to show that without giving proper credit. It's not going to show up. Or I'm not going to find something. Oh wait, what's this? Oh, there we go. I think that is definitely official artwork. Let's see if I can just get it to pop up. This last one, probably not, because I had to restart it to get it to pull up. Oh, there it is. So that is a squigoth. Yeah, and it cuts off a little towards the bottom, but you can kind of see the top of a regular orc there, and the bottom kind of almost all the way to the left, but like bottom mid-third to the left, or 2/3 to the left. Yeah. So that's how fucking big a squigoth is. They're huge, and they're great. They just really are. All right, I'm gonna start getting that through again. Love these guys. Yeah, they're huge, just monstrous. So yeah, so that's just they'll. So yeah, there's oil squigs, which they squeeze. Yeah, it does. I'm pretty sure it is. So they'll squeeze these fucking oil squigs, and oil comes out of their noses, which is crazy. Goth knobs, yeah. What's another one? Mending squigs, which they like the pain boys use, I guess, to help with wounds. Eating squigs, which kind of says something for itself or speaks for itself. Parasite hunting squigs. Bag squigs. They're just squigs that they turn into bags, or they're like walking bags. I don't know. I thought the name spoke for itself when I started thinking about it. I mean, like, these are orcs. They could literally just be like, they call it a bag squig, but they just put stuff in it and it follows them around. And then, yeah, and then there's even some they turn into musical instruments and they call them squig pipes. It's fantastic. It's lovely. And there's just, everything is so purpose built out of like things that are alive for orcs, and it kills me. Love it. So in this next section, I'm going to cover like a basic overview of their biology and their origin. I'm going to run through stuff like very, very surface level for the most part, because as it stands, my notes are already 15 pages long. Granted, 2 of those are pictures, I believe. So like 13 pages of notes. And this is me trying to keep it short. So if I missed something or there's something specific that you wanted to hear, I'm sorry. I'm just like, this is an overview only. Although I still think I go pretty deep in places. Anyway, so I have a quote I'm going to read you guys. This is from, I can't remember what book, but it's attributed to rogue trader Varnell Larik. It's Varnael, Larik. Of all the races I have battled throughout the galaxy, the Ork is the hardest to comprehend. They wage war with machines that should not work, care little for strategic gains, and are just as likely to slaughter each other as the enemy. How does one battle an enemy that defies all logic? Love it. Anyway, so Orks were actually biologically engineered by the old ones about 60 million years ago in the 40k timeline to fight against the Necrons in the War in Heaven along with the Eldar. Thanks, Guy. I appreciate it. I do. It actually makes me really happy that you guys are here, so thank you for coming again. But yeah, so they were genetically engineered, but were originally called, or they think anyway, they were originally called the Krork, which is Krork. Bitters. Not yeah. And who were actually, they were more technologically advanced than Orks, like with like crazy, like really technologically advanced, like some had some crazy good power armor. Some of the, I think, I've seen fan art of them. I don't know if there's official art of Krork. I think there are. Now I need to find a picture. Let's see. This one doesn't exactly give the scale of how big these dudes are, I think, properly, but let's see what we got here. Where are you, Krork? No, come back here. Go back. Yeah. No, you're going to do that to me again. All right, hold on. Fix that. And start slideshow. Now, where are you, Krork? There he is. So that is a Krork. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Now, the other big thing about Krork is they were said to be, what was it, 12 meters tall, which for the Americans in the room, aka me, that's roughly 40 feet tall. If I'm doing my math correctly. Yeah, about 40 feet tall. Just shy. So they're huge in power armor, and they're incredibly incredibly intelligent. And so all Orks, so after the War in Heaven and the Necrons did their thing, the Orks, or the Krorks, just, continued and, in essence, devolved into the Orks, is the running theory. So yeah, and so, War in Heaven ends, Eldar Ascendant up until they murder bang Slaanesh into existence and follow the Eldar, all that good stuff, which I'm sure I will talk about at some point. But what's kind of cool anyway, so as far as their origins, they actually have a interesting kind of, the way their biology works is through genetic encoding, right? So you can have like a singular feral orc on a planet, right? And he manages to survive long enough for more orcs and Gretchen to start spawning. Because I need to find that too. I meant to find it before this, but the orc life cycle, they are fungus, and so I need to find that fucking art because it's so good. It explains it like perfectly. They come out as spores. They will grow in the ground like literal fungus. Here, I'm going to restart the slideshow so I can show you this image that I just love. Where is it? Come on. Don't care. Is it? Just there it is. So the spore comes down, hits the ground, and then it goes into the ground and starts creating an orc, and it just absorbs nutrients through the dirt that it's in until it grows an orc, and this orc pops out of the ground. Boom, you have an orc. Yeah, this image is great. And from the surface, it's just fungus. It's mushrooms. So, and this happens just as they're living and doing their thing, these spores, or they release a ton of them when they die. You kill an orc in battle, and it just releases a metric shit ton of its babies everywhere. Which sounds really bad, but I mean, anyway. Moving on. But anyway, so you'd have a tribe of orcs, and then eventually, through genetic memory, you'll start. They call them odd boys. It's very, very bad. Yeah. They basically, when orcs are on a planet, they never leave again, except through Exterminatus, and even then, they'll still show up sometimes. Apparently, although I think that's like after the Exterminatus, and then they land again, and then it's crazy. But they're basically impossible to get rid of on a planet. Now, funny enough, if you've read the Kane books, they talk about it, and they've probably covered it in other spots too that I'm not familiar with. But at least the Valhallans were invaded by orcs, and they figured out that if you burn the bodies after you kill them, it leads to less orcs coming back. So apparently burning them, I mean, it kind of makes sense because as they're decaying, they're releasing more spores, and so on. But yeah, and so so they have these odd boys, and what that is that they're fire on the whole planets. Yeah, exactly. And even like you could scorch the planet clean of all life, and then throw an orc on it, and they would have more orcs eventually, because it's a self-sustaining ecosystem. I mean, they don't talk about like needing water, so I don't know how the hell that works, but I mean, they talk about how there's been orcs on, like, barren worlds. So, I don't know. I mean, these fuckers, they'll survive on space hulks, which are basically the galactic equivalent of driftwood, except they go through the warp, and they're like a bunch of, like, shipwrecks and asteroids smashed together into one piece. And, yeah. Usually they're full of gene stealers. And they don't have a Geller field, so when they go to the warp, they can be full of demons if there's stuff alive on them. And yeah, these guys will inhabit them for fun because they can, literally for fun, because they'll fight everything, and they love it. It's a blast. And anyway, so one thing I do have to throw out here real quick before I keep going on about odd boys. Or no, actually, that's next. Sorry. So odd boys, where their technology comes from, is how these orcs are separated out is when they reach maturity, they actually genetic memories become unlocked, and then that's when they start. That's where their technological knowledge comes from. So you can, like I was saying, you can have a tribe of feral orcs. They've that's it. Like they're naked. They have nothing, and eventually one orc will have a genetic memory unlock, and they're like, oh, this is how I make a fucking gun. And they will make one. And out of anything they can find. And it'll work. And so yeah. And so this is left over from the old ones. They encoded this knowledge in orcs. And actually what's even more interesting is all orcs, I don't know if this includes Gretchen too, I think it does. They actually have a basic working knowledge of mechanics. All of them. Now, feral orcs, it gets a little hazy. Don't really talk about that specifically. Up until the point of where there's enough of them that they then start having odd boys, and they become like a quote-unquote modern orc warband, which I'll talk about a bit more too. But yeah, that's why mech boys are just able to do their thing, and you never hear about like apprentice mech boys or whatever. They just they decide they are one, and then they are one. Now, what's really fun about orcs is that in general, they don't. There's no. Yeah, it's the Gretchen too that have the gene memory. Okay, that doesn't surprise me. It makes sense that they would. Yeah. So they, in general, like orcs, there are no psychic orcs. It's not entirely true. They do have weird boys, but they're even more rare than human psychers. because the mech boys, yeah. They're even more rare than human psychers. But, and this is probably my most favorite thing about orcs, is they just have this passive gestalt psychic abilities, or psychic, like, I don't know if you'd call it an aura or what, but as a species, they have this collective psychic ability that functions off of their belief. So if enough orcs believe something, it becomes reality. Yes, exactly. And so that's a big example is red is fast. Orcs believe that if something is painted red, it goes faster. If something is painted yellow, it makes a bigger explosion. It's actually why their guns work and why their vehicles work, because they believe that they will, and so they do. And so that's why you won't see typically humans picking up orc weapons and trying to use them, because as soon as somebody that's not an orc picks it up or tries to use it, it's going to do one of two things, or three really. It'll work, maybe, very rarely. It'll do nothing, or it'll explode. I'll let you decide which one happens more often. I can tell you right now, though, it's not the shooting. Although in the Kane books, when he's on Pearlier, his regulars use orc weaponry semi-successfully. But yeah, boom, boom, exactly. So that's why, if you absolutely have to have a projectile weapon and you have no other choices and you're about to die, you might as well pick up an orc weapon and try to use it. Because maybe you won't die, but it's not recommended. But yeah, they call it Dadaka. It's true. I can't do accents. I apologize. I've tried. I fail horribly. Dadaka. You can never have enough Daka. But yeah, as I kind of said already, like they are considered, they are a fungus, but they're also genetically they're a mix between a fungus and an animal, effectively. Which, I mean, obviously they do things anyway. But yeah, so they kind of get the best of both worlds. They reproduce via spores. They're relatively intelligent-ish. I mean, enough to wage war across vast distances of space, and successfully invade worlds. So that's mostly through sheer force of numbers. But hey, whatever. Excuse me. Then, like I said, they reproduce through through spores, not ore. Now, then the other thing is too is that they're stupidly resilient in a few different ways. So the most obvious one is that they're large, they're muscular, their skin's thicker. They go in main, or for GTs, I'm going main and orc. Wah! Oh, very nice. Game tournaments. I don't. The problem is I don't have the closest I would have to an LGS, local game store. For those who don't know, is like over an hour away, and not to mention, I don't have enough to do that, because I'm kind of like, I'm the guy when I see a miniature that I like, or if I have a particular desire for like some miniatures, I will buy those, I will build them and paint them. I don't go in. I have on the distance there, but I don't know. I don't really have the drive to build an army. I don't know. More because I'm into just the building and painting shit. Now, playing the game would be cool. Don't get me wrong. But like I said, I'm the guy who sees something cool and he wants it. He wants to build it and paint it. That's how I work. So, not that there's anything wrong with having armies, of course. Like, more power to you. You got the time, money, and patience to put all that together. Like, good on you. Straight up, you have my respect. It's just I don't have any of those things. Not respect, but the time, money, and all that good stuff. And radius to a store. So, from there, like I said, they reproduce through spores. They're really resilient. muscles, and they have almost no concept of pain. They do feel it, but very, very little. Now, the other thing too is that they have crazy regenerative abilities within them. So it's like, to kind of put this in perspective, you could cut an orc's head off and then sew it onto another body, and they'd be, more often than not, they'd be fine. Like, you can decapitate an orc and put its head back on its body and stitch it on there, and it most likely will live. Or there's orcs that have been cut into pieces that a pain boy will go through, which is their medics, which is, I mean, you're in for some fantastic medical care when your medics are called pain boys. We'll sew these dudes back together, and they will usually survive and go on to fight more. So, like, they're known, like, their heads are known to live for like minutes after cut off from their body, and it's crazy. Like, they survive shit that they really should not survive. And then, like I said, they have a self-sustaining ecosystem within themselves, between obviously themselves, the squigs, the Gretchen, the snotlings, and the fungus that pops up around their camps. So, yeah. Yes, we got the heelsies powers that the humans ain't got themselves. That came out kind of southern, but it's true. They're hard to even kill, or at least as much as you can kill them. And if you're unlucky enough and there's a pain boy nearby, or if their other boys give a shit enough, they can get hauled off to a pain boy, and they may come back. And actually, there's a very famous example of that happening to an orc, a very specific orc that I will cover at the very end. Well, second to very end. Now, what's really interesting about these guys, aside from their biology, is that they actually do have a functioning society and culture. Like, they're not just, they're fighting all the time. I mean, well, they are, but they do have a day-to-day function that actually runs. That's for the boss and his knobs. You're right. Yeah. So they do have a functioning culture and society. They have a social hierarchy, and just a general for them anyway, a really smoothly functioning culture, which is weird but hilarious. Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. Basically, their entire society is ruled by might makes right. So, orcs instinctively will follow the orders of orcs that are larger than themselves. Like, they won't, like, you couldn't take a Gretchen and put him in front of a Space Marine, and that Gretchen's going to listen to the Space Marine. They have to be orcs. So instinctually, if there is an orc larger than themselves, they are programmed to obey that orc. They also have no word for diplomacy, because all of their disputes are solved through fighting. So one orc says one thing, and the other orc says another thing, and they don't agree. Okay, they kick the shit out of each other until somebody wins, and then that orc is right. Like, that's how it works, top to bottom. And there's a lot of intelligent species in the galaxy, obviously aside from orcs, think that, like, to orcs, violence is a language. Like, they do have their own language, but they take a lot from Low Gothic and butcher it. But yeah, some species believe that violence that is communication, like, as a language to orcs. Because they use pain and brutality to make their points to each other. But yeah, so you got two orcs, right? What's diplomacy? Yeah, exactly. It's humies in words. You don't need to worry about it, right? But so you got a group of orcs, right? They're all relatively the same size. So they start fighting, and until finally there's one winner. Okay. This orc is now the war boss of this warband. That's how they choose leadership. Whoever can beat the crap out of everybody else, or the last guy who was in charge is now in charge. Ooh. Had a little bit of a power flicker there. Hopefully I didn't lose yet. Doesn't look like it. There's enough to where my APC clicked. Wah, boss! Exactly. But yeah, so the most successful, and it's also victories too. They have to keep winning as well to stay in power. It's not just they're bigger than everyone else, although that can really help. But eventually, somebody will get sick of their shit and try to kill them, and they'll either be successful and they take over, or they won't be, and it's, yeah. Anyway. Yeah, they'll become war bosses, and those are usually in charge of like a single war band, which is like a regular-sized army. I think you'd compare it to... trying to think of it in terms of Imperial Guard. Would that be a regiment size? Roughly, I think that's like a regiment size. Makes up a single orc warband. And what's crazy is the more orcs that or the more orcs that respect a singular orc, the larger this orc becomes, like physically, and stronger, and you know yeah. And I think it's a combination of their genetics and their energy. A big boy who ain't crumpin', he's no wall boss. Exactly. That's the other thing too, is they also have to be constantly looking for fighting. Otherwise, his boys will get bored and will either start killing each other or will think about killing him because he's not leading them. Oh, another important note about orc biology is technically they don't have a gender because they are a fungus. They produce asexually, but they're all dudes. Yeah, ads. I'll wait for this to end here before I continue. Or, well, I mean, if essentially... sorry, I was typing. Anyway. Yeah, so they're technically, they don't have gender, they produce asexually through spores, blah, blah, blah. But they're all dudes. They're referred to as boys, masculine, all that good shit. So, important note about their biology that I kind of forgot to mention. So we got that covered now. Anyway. So then, as a war boss, you're constantly looking for fights. So then you will go... Thanks, Mornerval. You're welcome. So then there's the war boss at the top, and then he has his own, like, I guess you'd call them sub bosses, but they're called knobs. That's N-O-B-Z. That's a knob right there in that picture. Actually, I think this is a mega knob. Yeah, because he's got the armor. Anyway, they're not as big as the war boss, but they are larger than other orcs, and they're usually like battle hardened veterans. Like, they've been around for a while in terms of orcs, anyway. They'll also be better equipped than standard orcs. And more aggressive, just in general. Yeah, Dems dem mega knobs. Yeah. However, they also keep the war boss in check. So if the war boss is looking weak, like he's not leading to war, or he's not winning, or, you know, whatever, any sign of weakness, these knobs can and will try to kill him and take his place. So orc warbands are fracturing or imploding, or they're always fighting, either themselves or something else. Now, a war boss can then go on to become a warlord, which is they're in control of like a tribe, which is like several war bands all under one banner. Better shooters, better choppers, better armor. That was Arnold a little bit. But yeah, so they will just keep fighting until forever. They never stop fighting. They don't have an enemy, they fight each other because they're bored. Or they'll find demons to fight because your name is Tuska. Anyway. But yeah, so what makes up the vast bulk of like the mainline orc army are just boys. That's BOYZ. Clans, Dems, clans, boss. I thought clans were the bigger, like the big ones, like Goths and Bad Boons. Whereas like a tribe is, or am I getting that reversed? I think I'm getting that reversed. Maybe. I have it, where did I have it written further in here. Oh yeah, no, you are right. You are right, it is clans. I even have it in my notes correctly. Good lord. Anyway. We'll get there in a sec. No. You were right originally. Clans are the smaller ones. No. I was right. Good lord. Warbands will join together in what is called, called a clan. No. Okay, I messed up on my, There's warbands, then tribes, and then several tribes can be in a clan, and it's a whole thing. Clans are like, well, I'll talk about it in a sec. Well, you'll understand. I promise. So the vast majority of an orc army are boys, BOYZ, and these are like the standard looking orcs. Let's see here. Should be the next image that pops up. These guys right here. Yeah, here we go. Those are boys. Just your box standard. Actually, there's probably a knob in the back there, but your box standard boys. That's they're considered the baseline orcs. And they're usually they'll have like a choppa, which is basically sharpened metal on a stick. Yeah, it's a bit confusing. Yeah. And a shooter. No, it's a slugga actually. It's the little pistol. And they'll just charge across the battlefield and they'll fuck shit up. But that's the vast majority of them. Now, from there you'll also have, I call them specializations, but they're, I'm trying to remember what the orcs refer to them as. But they'll have like specialization mobs. That's what they're called. They call them different mobs, MOBs. With examples, I said a couple earlier. So Pain Boys, the medics, Mech Boys, and Weird Boys, and there's a lot more after that. But yeah, so they do have those specializations, but even then, the might makes right thing still applies. So smaller, weaker orcs are still subservient. Yeah, it's like a shoot it all Daka and Crumpen. You right. They also maintain that might makes right like internal structure. Like that's at every level of orc society is this might makes right thing. So yeah. But what's crazy is that they just like very easily fall into a natural command structure. Who's the biggest? Okay, he's in charge. Well, I don't agree with that. All right, well, he just beat your ass, so okay, yeah, I guess he is in charge now. And that, and somebody might come along and try to fight him later or whatever. So there is a lot of shifts in it, but in general, like they're pretty structured, even if that structure changes a lot. Now, so like I mentioned earlier, Gretchen are like a servant slave class, and that's accurate. They do go to war, like I was saying earlier. They'll run in packs and they'll swarm over stuff and kill them for fun, and because they're told to. Not really for fun, mostly because they're told to. They don't necessarily like to fight, but because they're cowards. Who's cracking Dumbo's heads? He be the boss. You right. That's exactly how it works. Shit, I may need to get more water in a sec. But yeah, so Gretchen basically do all the day-to-day shit that orcs don't do, because all orcs care about is fighting or getting ready to fight. And every other aspect, they don't give a shit. Like, for the most part, there are some mobs that do have some like logistical support, whatever roles, but by and large, that's all handled by Gretchen. So they prepare the food, they run messages, they move shit from one place to another, they scavenge, general organizational things, and providing entertainment for an orc by getting kicked by them when he's bored. But funnily enough, they're fine with it. Like, they've accepted that this is their role in the universe, and they don't actually hold a lot of resentment for orcs. Like, they're just, the way they're treated is just a fact of life. Like Gretchen, which they also refer to them as grots, confusingly. They'll call them grots too. Just have accepted that's how it is and how it will always be. And what's funny is, like, aside from like their general, like, there's kind of like a weird cultural thing there too that was covered in Gazgul Prophet of the Law, where like publicly they have to treat him like shit, and then individually they're a little nicer. But nicer is a really hard word to use when you're talking about orcs, because they're not nice. But anyway, Gretchen can actually have like decent lives, but the catch there is that they have to be useful. Like, whatever orc takes them under their protection or whatever, because that's essentially what happens, is you find an orc to serve, and he, like, only this orc beats the crap out of me instead of all of them. And you're less likely to get eaten, because they will, that's another thing about orcs and their biology, they will, they eat the squigs, but if there's no squigs, then they'll eat the Gretchen. If there's no Gretchen, then they'll start eating each other. So they have, like, they don't give a shit. They'll be cannibals, they don't care. Without hesitation. There's zero hesitation. They'll just eat whatever. But yeah, so as long as they have, like, whatever orc is protecting them sees that they have a useful skill, whatever it is, or they find them useful in general, they're actually not treated as terribly individually. And what's really funny is they have their own, like, black market that runs in the background. So, like, orcs have their way of doing shit, and then Gretchen have, like, their own black market amongst each other. They'll sell each other fungus beer, they'll sell each other, like, roasted squigs on sticks, and they'll even run gambling rings for when a fight breaks out, and then who gets, I think it's like, who gets rights to loot the corpse of the loser or whatever. So it's very funny. Yeah, so then you have your standard, you have the warband, which is considered the standard orc army, like, in terms of size. And then multiple warbands will join together in what's called a tribe. This is where I got it mixed up. Will form a tribe. Now, what the big macro group is, those are called clans. That's with a K. And what clans are like, basically, they're, it's hard to explain. They're like an overall kind of, like, almost like not like a variation of an orc in a sense, but in terms of, like, how they view, like, their philosophical views as far as, like, warfare is, obviously warfare is the big one. And so this will manifest in, like, the different big clans. So you have, let's see, I'm trying to remember who all of them are. Well, I'll get there in a sec. But yeah, so they have all the same, like, philosophical, yeah, they tend to run in a theme. And this will cover, like, huge swathes of the galaxy. Like, these could be orcs that have, like, never seen another member of their clan, but they'll kind of just, I don't exactly know how that works, but they'll kind of just figure out that they're whatever in this clan, and even to the point of where, but they represent, like, the foundation upon which their whole society is built, is based off of these clans. And there's this great greenskin thinker. Take that with a grain of salt. Orchimedes once said, "Thinking is for gits, but everyone's a git, so you might as well then think like some other gits." Gotta love an orc thinker, right? Anyway, so the six acknowledged main, yeah, I was just about to talk about. There's the freebooters too, freebooters, which are pirates. effectively. But the 6 like main clans, you have the Bad Moons, the Blood Axes, the Death Skulls, the Evil Sons, the Goffs, that's Goffs, and the Snake Bites. And they all have their own preferred method of warfare, like their own glyphs that represent their clan, and they all have like a similar color theme. Like Goffs wear like black, Snake Bites wear green, so on and so forth. But they also have like physical characteristics that'll kind of show through when you're in a different clan. So there's this thought that it's also partially biological, like it's built into their DNA to be a part of these clans, because there'll be similar physical characteristics that they will have to other members of their clan. For example, Bad Moons, they're considered the richest of all the clans, and that's because their teeth grow faster than all the other clans. Their teeth grow at a faster rate. So stuff like that. So it's not just like this surface level theme kind of thing. Like there's kind of a deeper layer to it, which is kind of an overall thing that I like about the Orks in general. It's like these like surface level. You look at them, they're just savage monsters, whatever. But then you start to get deeper into their stuff, and it's like, I don't know. It's kind of neat. I like how it all comes together. But yeah, so you have clans, which are like these big macro groups. Then you have war bands, which are like their standard army sizes, and then you have a tribe, which is multiple war bands under a warlord, is how it works. Which is like a, big bad war boss that's even bigger and badder. Anyway, so if you have like a tribe, you'll have different members of these clans in a singular tribe. So you have like a clan, like guys who are orcs who are clans of Goths, and fighting, alongside Bad Moons or whatever. Because individually an orc's allegiance isn't directly to their clan, it's to their war boss. Like they're either their warlord for the tribe or their war boss in the war band. So you'll have war bands or tribes that will fight each other, and you'll see orcs of the same clan fighting each other. Like, that's considered totally normal. So, yeah. And that's, like I said, that's totally normal for orc society. Like, your immediate individual loyalty is to your war boss. That's just how it works. And it's all instinctual, which is crazy. Now, what's also interesting about their society is that, so if two orc tribes fight, and one beats the other, what happens is the defeated tribe, what's left of them, get absorbed into the victorious tribe, and it's relatively seamless. And actually, sometimes they're kind of happy about it, because in an orc bind, if their war boss lost, it's because he was weaker. So if he's weaker than the war boss who just beat them, they're like, oh, well, this is the stronger boss. This is the better, stronger orc. Cool, let's follow him. And it's like, it's almost seamless, which is like kind of a crazy thing when you think about it. Like, it's like, oh, you just were murdering me 10 minutes ago. Oh, but now your war boss killed mine, so okay, sure, yeah, let's murder together. Like, it's great. But it all kind of circles back around to their, like, that instinctual hierarchy that's built into them. Like, it's that easy. It's like, this orc beat me. Cool, he's in charge now, and that's it. So yeah. Now, so with orcs, they do have their Gestalt psychic stuff, but they also do have a reflection in the warp. So like humans and Eldar, like they all contribute to the ruinous powers and all that stuff. Well, orcs have their own gods that have manifested, called Gork and Mork. That's Gork and Mork. Gork and Mork. Orcs say that Gork is brutal but cunning, and Mork is cunning but brutal. Oh, I forgot I meant to turn that bot off. Oh well. And so these are their gods, just Gork and Mork. And there is kind of like not like holy wars, but they kind of are, where, some orcs are like more, say Orc is strong, or Mork is stronger, or another one says that Gork's strong, and yeah. But it's not that serious. But what's fun is that they will they'll have their gods represented on the battlefield in the form of course, war machines, like big ass war machines, like Gargants and Stampas, and then they also have Gorkanauts and Morkanauts, which are exactly what they sound like, and they're built as tribute and imitation of their chosen god, so Gork or Mork. And whoever's in command of this thing, their quote unquote pilot, is usually like just flooded with visions from Gork or Mork, telling them to just kill more, fight more, just fight. Now, it's really fun, and something that a lot of people may not know about, maybe you do, is they do actually have a trade system. Like they have, yeah, those things are so silly. I like I said, man, Orc tech is just, it's so fantastic. All of it, top to bottom. But anyway, yeah, they do actually have a trade system and currency. I kind of alluded to it earlier, talking about the guys that are the richest because they grow their teeth faster. Well, their currency is teeth. It's their fucking teeth. So what's interesting is it's actually self-sustaining in the fact that inflation and all that can't happen because, one, orcs lose teeth constantly. Like, it's said that they're like sharks. They're just constantly losing and growing new teeth. Teeth. Yes, pronounced teeth. T-E-F. Teeth. And then because they're teeth, they degrade over time. So you can't actually hoard large amounts of teeth because they'll degrade. So what that does is it keeps the prices basically the same. There's a little bit fluctuation here and there, but basically it's stable. So dumb, I know. But the other thing is like it then feeds into this ingrained need for violence, and it is a need with orcs. Like, they need to fight. They just need to. They have to fight all the time, basically. So if you're low on quote unquote cash, plays into the violence of the orc culture, and so you just beat the crap out of somebody until you knock all their teeth out. Now all of a sudden you have enough teeth or money to do whatever you need to do. So yeah, that's a very, very top, like, very brief overview of orc society and all that good shit. Which it's just a blast. All of it. It's just so fucking. It's so 40k. All of it is. Laughs and orc. Yeah. I mean, they use their own fucking teeth for currency. They believe things into reality. Like, all they do is just, yeah. It's fantastic. I just love them. Now, here we're going to get more into the specializations or the mobs that I was talking about earlier. I just kind of fired off a bunch of, like, a couple of the more common ones. So I'm going to get into that a little bit more here for a minute. So, like I said, the vast majority of an orc army are boys, B-O-Y-Z, and it's boys is also used as a general term for orcs. Like, a war boss will turn and refer to his army as his boys or whatever. So it's not just that, but they're made up of boys. But there are a lot of, like I said, what I call them specializations. This is me fave part. Yeah. They're also, like I said, they're called mobs. Now, there is, like, the generalized category, and they're all kind of all listed as odd boys, which I sort of talked about earlier. They're different, like, favors of, like, they'll have whatever technology pop into their brain, but they all kind of fall under this generalized odd boys category. So the one that I've talked about, I think the most out of all of them so far, are the pain boys, which, as I said, are the orc medics. They're also known as doks, D-O-K-S, or mad doks. So they're basically anything that an orc can't regenerate from on their own or can't take care of by themselves, they go to a pain boy or a dok. Which, you would think they'd be kind of okay with doing. No. They literally, the only time that an orc wants to go to a pain boy is when they're literally about to, like, actually die. Because they have no Hippocratic oath. They will just do whatever they want to you. Like, if they're like, you know what? I want to jam this piece of, like, metal and wire into this dude's brain just to see, if it'll make him smarter or stronger, they're gonna do it. Yeah. I heard talk of a squig brain transplant. Apparently that's a thing. So, yeah. Experimental procedures, like, whatever. There's even been talks about how you'll go in, you're missing, say, your left leg. And you're like, all right, doc, I need a cybernetic leg. Okay, sure. And then you wake up and they replaced your right arm instead. Just because they wanted to. The Mad Docs is scary. They are. Like, for fuck's sakes, their medical tools are referred to as stabby bits. Stabby bits. And anesthesia in orcs is beating you into unconsciousness. Yeah. That's their anesthesia. They just beat you until you're unconscious. Yeah, so on top of that, so they're the medics, which means they also graft on the bionics used by orcs. So they're prosthetics, all that good stuff. And they don't necessarily, although again, it's a pain boy, you don't necessarily want, like, orcs don't want to do this, but if they are feeling particularly stupid, they'll go to a pain boy and be like, yo, give me something to make me murder better. And they're like, okay. And sometimes it happens. One that's talked about, though, so the next specialization, it's not talked about a lot. You mostly see them in feral orc bands, but they also, I think the snake bites are the more, like, animal taming kind of guys, if I'm remembering right. But anyway, they're called herdas, or like herders, except herdas. And it's what they sound like. They basically they manage the larger squigs. And that's their whole thing, is they're like the beast tamers, kind of. And then, so from there you have the mad boys. And they got crazy thinks sometimes and put them mech bits on us boys. Yeah. Pain boys will just, they'll throw whatever the fuck they want on you because they can. Or they're bored. But yeah, so there's mad boys. And so these are orcs that were either from gestation, like they just weren't quite right in the head, or they took a brain injury. And so now they're just kind of off for orcs. Like, they will respond completely chaotically, like, to situations. Like, you'll charge them and they will, I don't know, pick their noses or some shit. Like, I was reading some of the, like, the old rules for Mad Boys where, like, you'd take an action towards them and you'd roll to see what how they would respond. And, like, one of them was, like, schizo and the other one was, like, manic or something like that. It was, like, yeah. So they're insane. And they will actually congregate around weird boys for some reason. Like, they kind of form, like, an informal retinue for weird boys. Nobody really knows why, they just do. But they are kind of, like, they're not necessarily outcasts from orcs camps, although they kind of are. But they will, like, live like, away from the rest of the tribe in, like, shanty towns. Now, conversely, and I thought this was crazy, Mad Boys are actually, they're considered a sign of good fortune to orcs. I don't know why. I couldn't find a reason why, but it was said that for whatever reason, Mad Boys are considered lucky. I have no fucking clue why, but it's hilarious, and I hope that is accurate. Let's see here. Where is my... Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so next up you have Mech Boys. They're called Mechanics, which is... Or Mechanics? Mechanics? It is pronounced Mechanics. It's the Wa energy gets them odd powers. It's true. But yeah, you have Mech Boys, or Mechanics, which is Mekniks, or Mechs. So they're equating them to the Imperium. They're like the Mechanicus. Although, don't ever make... Yeah, anyway, don't say that's Mechanicus. They won't like that. But that's effectively what they are. They're engineers. They're inventors. They're the ones that create their bionics. They build their vehicles. Mechnics, yeah. They build their vehicles. They maintain their vehicles. That's so... mechs are... Or mechnics are... Or Mech Boys, I'm just saying Mech Boys, that's easier, are very prized with Ork speed freaks, which I'll talk about them in a little bit and you'll kind of see why. But their speed freaks are all about fast as fuck vehicles, and so the mechs keep them in quote unquote good order, because if you say good order about anything orky, it's not accurate, but functional. There we go. Sometimes, although mechs will become so famous or infamous or whatever that they'll lead their own war bands, and they'll become known as they'll be called a mech boss. And then sometimes they'll have them called like the really famous ones they'll call big mechs, and they'll have like little cadres of other mech boys that kind of just follow them around and do what they're told by this big mech. So he's like the Einstein of mech boys, and then he's bigger, and he beat the shit out of the other mech boys, and now other mech boys are following him and doing what he's told. Now these guys I hadn't really heard about before, and I had always kind of wondered where feral orcs came from. Like, I know we're like obviously the remnants of, an orc host is wiped out, the spores grow, and they're off in some random part of the world, and they're feral. But another way that you get feral orcs is you have wild boys. So typically with orcs, they don't actually like to stray very far from their tribe. They want to stick with their tribe, like, so they can go to war and, get the things that they need, like, bullets and shooters and choppas and all that good stuff. But some of them will actually just like say, you know what, fuck you, I'm gonna go and find and just explore. And they'll go out into like the shittiest of places in the middle of nowhere and then just decide they're gonna live there. Which then eventually will lead to a feral orc tribe, which are basically Stone Age orcs. And then again, as more and more orcs are created, gestated, born, I don't know, whatever word you want to use, as more orcs are created from the spores of these wild boys, eventually they'll hit like a critical mass and they'll become a quote-unquote civilized warband, where they'll start having technology like, projectile weapons, power armor, motorcycles, like, yeah, it's whatever tribe size you need for the orc genetic memory to kick in and for them to start being like, oh yeah, this is how you build a motorcycle, like, so yeah, that's another that they'll it's kind of cool how they'll go from feral to like a full-blown warband if they're left alone long enough, which also speaks to why they are so, I guess, feared. Because even if you are like, fuck it, they're just feral, like, they just have sticks and stones and whatever, eventually they will then upgrade themselves to, like, guns and power armor and, like I said, vehicles. So you can't even leave the feral orcs alone. You have to kill them all, and even then, they're just going to come back at some point. Anyway, so I talked about these guys, or I mentioned them when I was talking about mechs, but then you have speed freaks. Like I said, these guys are all about going fast. They just want to go fast. They want to get into battle before any other orc. Shit is always painted red, because red makes it go faster. And they actually even, like, they're so addicted to speed, just the sensation of going fast, that other orcs will say that they're a part of the cult of speed, and that's cult with a K. Yeah, so that's all, they're all about going fast. They want to go fast. They want to go fast. So the last mob or specialization that I'm going to talk about, at least extensively, because there's a lot more that I'm just going to, like, one sentence touch over. I just wanted to cover kind of the more common ones. But anyway, so the last and probably the most rare of all the mobs, and I've mentioned them before, are the weird boys. They are orc psychers. However, there's a big difference between a weird boy and a psyker of any other race, and that is that weird boys don't actually pull power directly from the warp. They instead pull energy from the Wa, like the war cry that orcs have. Like, that's basically what their gestalt psychic, their passive psychic belief shit is. The energy from that they call Wa energy, and so that's where the weird boys actually pull the power for their abilities. Now that doesn't mean it's safer, mind you. It just means that they're not going to summon demons. However, they can pull in too much power and explode their own heads, which then will cause a psychic backlash and might explode the heads of other orcs in a certain radius. It just depends on how much power and how much it goes out of control. Weird boys don't necessarily want to get into conflict, typically, because of this, because they don't want to blow up their own fucking heads. However, war bosses don't care, and they will tell them to go into combat anyway, because they're a fucking war boss. Now, there are certain weird boys that actually do like combat, and they do like wielding their power in war, and they actually, if they survive, become exceptionally dangerous. Like, even amongst weird boys, these guys are, like, they're scary. And they're called warp heads. And despite their origins, they are not to be fucked with. So yeah, that's like very brief overview over the big ones. Now, kind of going into, like I said, this is a little more rapid fire. This is just specific ones. So, first one is, and I don't even think this is a full list. This is just, again, the more prolific ones. So you have mega knobs, which there's a picture floating by. Basically, they are knobs, except they have power armor. They usually have the best armor, like, even for knobs. Usually the only one who has better power armor in weaponry is the war boss. But then from there, it's mega knobs. And then their armor is called mega armor, which is just orc power armor. But of course, it's mega armor because it's orcs. Whatever. Don't question it. Just embrace it. Then you have Burna boys, and they're crazy arsonists. They specialize in flame weaponry. That's their whole thing is fire. Then you have commandos, which is Kommandoz. Commandos. And they're different because they actually are specialized in infiltration and stealth, which is kind of funny to think about with orcs, because most orcs, that's not their style. They run in, they chop, they blast, whatever. But commandos actually sneak behind enemy lines, will do assassinations and sabotage, and just spread panic and fear in the back lines. Like, that's what they love to do. And they're rare. But that also kind of makes them more dangerous because when all your experience with orcs is like they just charge right into your face, you're never going to suspect the one that actually decides to sneak behind you and stab you in the back when you're not looking. So, and they're actually really good at stealth, apparently. Like, really good. Then you have tank busters, which is exactly what they sound like. They are carry weaponry specifically tailored to destroy vehicles. War bikers, again, very self-explanatory. Usually those guys are speed freaks. They're crazy fast war bikes with a bunch of weapons, and they will just plow into the enemies, blast them, circle around, fly, and come back and do it again. That's what they do. Flyboys, they are the Ork pilots for like their aircraft. Then you have Storm Boys, and actually they are basically the Ork equivalent of Space Marine assault squads with jetpacks, except they're rocket packs. They literally look like big, just rockets strapped to their backs, and they get into the middle of stuff and just mess stuff up with short range weapons. Oh yeah, the purple orc joke. So there's a community joke. Thank you for reminding me about that. So like I mentioned earlier with colors, so you have red, faster, yellow, explodes more. Well, the community joke is that you've never seen a purple orc, and it's because they believe something painted purple makes it invisible. So that's why you never see a purple orc, because they're invisible. So it's fantastic. I love it. I don't think that's canon. I'm like 100% sure it's not canon, but it is a running joke that you'll probably hear from other people who are really into orcs. You'll hear about the purple orc joke, and yeah, so it's good stuff. So yeah, after Storm Boys, you have Flash Gits, and so these guys, I mean, orcs are always looking for better weapons, but Flash Gits, like, they go to crazy and dim commandos like Purpo. That's true, right? The commandos like purple. But yeah, Flash Gits, basically they're all about their guns. Like, they're very big into guns. It's all about the DACA. More DACA. It's all DACA. They'll hire themselves out as mercenaries to other warbands. Between, like, they'll go on like they'll go on long stints of piracy just to give themselves like a really awesome shooter and you know, just the best guns that they can find, and then they'll sell their services to other warbands. Then you have Lootas, Lootas, looters, and they're heavy weapons support infantry, and they do exactly what their name sounds like. They take everything in order to enhance their killiness. So yeah, so those are like the most common. There's probably a few that I'm missing. Like I said, I'm not trying to get all of them because there's a lot, but those are the most common that I've seen. Now there are actually, I think I talked about them slightly. There are classifications of odd boys that are more for the function of society. So you have some boys, like a sum of numbers. Some boys are their bankers. They mention yellers, which are their priests, and then brew boys, which are their cooks, which kind of conflicts with Gretchen being their cooks, so I don't know if, whatever, that might be old. But yeah. But they do still serve an important function within the warband. Like, they are necessary to the function of the warband. Fuck, I should have grabbed myself another drink. So yeah. Oh. Throat's getting a little dry. But yeah, so you have, most of them are geared towards war, and then there's a couple of, you know, ones that they actually do need for the function of their quote-unquote society. So next section, I'm going to talk about orc weapons. And I'll probably go through this pretty quick. Well, no, never mind. I have a lot here. Good lord. But yeah, you'll kind of catch a theme in a minute that orcs don't believe in anything close to standardization. If that wasn't already apparent, you're going to see it a lot more in their weapons. Now, I have another quote. This is from Uthan the Perverse, an Eldari philosopher. That's Eldar for the noobs there. Yeah, they have not only do they have just like what you like bog standard regular like weapons, they also then have like insane weapons, like shit that's like, wow, who thought of that? Well, an orc did. But anyway, I have this quote from this Eldar philosopher. The orcs are the pinnacle of creation. For them, the great struggle is won. They have evolved a society which knows no stress or angst. Who are we to judge them? We Eldari who have failed, or the humans on the road to ruin in their turn. And why? Because we sought answers to questions that an orc wouldn't even bother to ask. We see a culture that is strong and despise it as crude. This is coming from an Eldar. Oh, okay. You know what? I have to grab a drink. I will be back very quickly. I apologize. Oh, okay. Much better. All right. So, orc weapons. Now, generally speaking, as a rule, with orcs, bigger, messes shit up more, louder, and flashier, the better. And orcs in general will always seek the next biggest weapon that they can find, the next best one, whatever, the next bestest. Next bestest? Bestest. Not asbestos, bestest. Whatever. As the saying goes, you can never have enough DACA. And that's true. Orcs live that every day. There's never enough DACA. Now, like I said earlier, standardization for orcs doesn't exist. It's not a thing. So keep that in mind as I go through this. So the weapon that every orc has is called a choppa. Or chopper. Choppa. C-H-O-P-P-A. Choppa. And it's literally any piece of metal shaped into like an axe or a sword. Like anything that has like an edge or a spike or a serration is jagged, notched melee weapon. It's a choppa. Like, that's it. Like, it looks like a big-ass cleaver. It's a choppa. Looks like a big-ass, like, it's a stop sign with sharpened edges. It's a choppa. Yeah. Now, and those are usually one-handed. Now, when you get into, say, two-handed choppas, they then become big choppas. See the difference there? Yeah. It's choppa and then big choppa. Now, the thing about big choppas is that they can actually... some are equally as crude, like to the point of where it's just heavy as shit. They don't care about putting an edge on it, and they'll still cut somebody in half just because it's so heavy and they're so strong. But they also will have like big two-handed chain axes. Will be a choppa or a big choppa. Here, actually, I have some pictures. Except it's going to be stupid. Never mind. I had it in the document. I don't know why I didn't just send myself the pictures, because I'm smart. So, yeah, choppas. It's a melee weapon. It's a choppa. It could be a chain axe, and actually they'll even have like circular saws on there as well. So, basically every orc has a choppa in one form or another. So after that, we actually get into a ranged weapon called a slugga. It's S-L-U-G-G-A. They're one-handed, as with all other orc weaponry, crudely made, and short-ranged slug throwers. So they're basically, you'd equate them to a pistol, right? Now, keep in mind, this is big enough for an orc to use, so these are big-ass pistols. And, as with all weapons, orcs want their weapons to be big, loud, and extremely deadly. Accuracy, not important. It just needs to be loud and flashy too. It's got to have a big flash. And so then accuracy is not a big deal. I mean, sure, right? But then you have thousands of orcs with these sluggas. They may not be aiming well or at all, but there's thousands of them all firing. Somebody's going to hit something at some point. So that's kind of their idea of it. It makes a loud noise. It's bright. It shoots a big thing. They're happy. Eventually, they'll kill somebody with it. Oh, man. So, but again, no standardization. It's literally a one-handed. If it's a pistol and it fires a slug, it's a slugga. That's it. Like they come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. But those are the things. Yeah, it's an orc gun line. Exactly. Except they're charging straight at you and screaming, and they're huge and strong. Yeah. So yeah, those are sluggas. So then we go up to shootas, 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 which are kind of the next step up from sluggas, and basically they're equivalent to about a Space Marine bolter or a rifle. I'm not sure if all of them fire bolt shells or not, or if a lot of them are just big slug throwers. I guess it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. Anyway, they're basically rifles. They're orc rifles, and they come in, again, huge variety of styles, and yeah, it's crazy. I don't remember. Yeah. I know they do have bolters. Like, for sure, they do fire bolt shells. I just don't know if that's what all shootas are, or bolt guns. Anyway. But yeah, so when an orc boy has decided that he's outgrown his slugga, he's gonna go for a shoota as an upgrade. And yeah, they have to have there's the same requirements. Has to be loud, has to be destructive, and has to have, in this case, a high rate of fire, as high as possible. And there's actually even more categories of shootas. So you have, the standard shootas, what you would consider a standard shoota, which is just a rifle. And then you have big shootas, which are exactly what they sound like. They're just larger shootas, and are often customized to have multiple sights or multiple barrels, or other improvements that they just feel like throwing on there. There's also a twin-linked version, which they call a Daka gun, and you'll see those on like war bikes and other vehicles. From there, you have Supa shootas, which, if I'm understanding correctly, are effectively autocannons. Then you have Ork cannons with a K, and they're exactly, they sound like they're big ass, like man portable cannons that these carry around. They have thick barrels, huge shells or slugs or whatever, big, loud, and it fucks shit up if it hits anything. That's an orc gun. Also, I think super shooters, you'll actually see, like, war bosses will have them as like weaponry, or cannons, or both. I think both, actually. I mean, war bosses will have whatever the fuck they want, as long as they can put it on their armor and shoot it, and it's loud, they'll use it. So, moving back away from ranged weapons and into the preferred method that orcs like to kill people, melee range, and probably my favorite. Oh yeah, they have Gretchen cannons. Those are fun. But yeah, so they will. Whoops. There we go. But yeah, that's one of the crazier orc weapons, which I'll mention a few of those towards the end here of this section. But yeah, it's probably my favorite orc weapon is the Power Claw, and that's claw with a K. And it's grafted onto an orc, and you'll see them. I think it's knobs is where you'll first start seeing power claws. But it's essentially it's like a power fist, except instead of like a hand, like a big gauntlet, it's a big hydraulic claw. And actually, the mega knob that just flashed by has a power claw, and actually that knob in the back, kind of in the middle there, that's a power claw. But it's a big hydraulic claw, and then it has a disruptive field that goes around the actual like claws themselves, which will just like it just destroys solid matter when it hits. So if the energy field doesn't get you, well, then it's just gonna the crushing claws will do the rest. Yeah, there we go. Gazgul there has them. They're pretty awesome. They're just big fucking like it's like they're basically Jaws of Life, except turned into a weapon of war and used as a prosthetic. In some cases, not all cases, but generally speaking, yeah, it's a prosthetic for a missing arm. The other thing is too, though, is they'll also put them on their big walkers. Some of their big walkers will have them too, like Gargants, I think, have them, and maybe Stampas, but I know anyway. Some of their big walkers will have power claws, like huge, fucking hydraulic claws. I just love them. I just love power claws. They're so cool. Now, I mentioned Burna Boys earlier, so of course they do have flame weapons. In this case, the man-portable Imperial Guard equivalent to a flamer is called a Burna. That's Burna, B-U-R-N-A. And then instead of a heavy flamer, they have a Scorcher, S-K-O-R-C-H-A. And those are about the equivalent to, like I said, a heavy flamer, just a big-ass flamethrower. They'll also have smaller versions that they'll attach to other weapons, like a Shuda, for example, to make their combi weapons. Because orcs do, in fact, have combi weapons, which is honestly not that surprising, since they just slap shit together, because it makes it more shooty and have more Daka. And yeah, it's glorious. Could never have enough Daka. So yeah, as I said, they do have combi weapons. So you have like the combi like bolter and plasma gun, or the what's the other one? Anamelta or something. You'll see those on like Space Marines and stuff. And I think some of the better equipped Imperial Guard regiments get them too. But mainly, I think it's Space Marines. I could be wrong on the Imperial Guard part. But anyway, I know for sure Space Marines get them. But effectively, it's just a modern equivalent would be like an M4 rifle with an underslung grenade launcher or a shotgun. It's the same idea, except in this case, it's a flamethrower or a rocket or an energy weapon. Sci-fi shit. It's great. And then war bosses and warlords will actually do get something like a Melta. I can't remember what it's called though. They do have. I know orcs do have some energy weapons, but it's different. Like, it's weird because it's orcs, of course. Anyway, yeah. So like war bosses and warlords, they always have the best stuff, the most destructive shit, the loudest, the flashiest. Like, just in every way that something can be the best. War bosses have that. They have the best, right? And so this will often include a custom Shuda, which can be twin-linked big Shudas to make a combi weapon. Or, like I said, add a Scorcher on it, or an energy weapon, and they will just pile on shit onto these things, because you can never have enough Daka, right? So then from there, they do have anti-tank weapons, and so the one that you'll see with infantry a lot is called a rocket launcher, and that's R-O-K-K-I-T, and you'll see them most often with tank busta mobs, which I did mention earlier. But anyway, they're anti-armor infantry, the tank bustas are, and then they have the way that their rocket launches are, they're similar to a German Panzerfaust, so they will actually use them while running, and of course they're orcs, they're huge, they don't give a shit, so they'll be running with these rocket launches and just fire them without stopping. Now again, they don't care about accuracy, so of course they don't give a shit. They'll fire them and try to kill something, and if they hit it, awesome. If not, it just makes a big explosion and they're still happy. Like, either way, they're thrilled. So, these also, you'll see them mounted on vehicles. I believe Killicons have them, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. They're like... I'll talk about them in a bit. They're pretty cool. But they're like miniature they're walkers, or some of their trucks will have them. But, you know, any place that you would think... or that you typically see like a rocket launcher on like a human vehicle, they do the equivalent with their rocket launchers, just, you know, much, much less accurate. But that's kind of the most... That's a rundown of the most common orc weaponry, the stuff that you'll see a lot of the time. Now, I'm already at the almost hour and 45-minute mark, which is kind of thought, oh, he would. Michael Bay would love to film 40K Orks in battle. It's all explosions. He'd be thrilled. And tracers and bullshit. But anyway, yeah, so, you know, I'm already at the hour and 45-minute mark. I still have like 4 sections after this to go, so I'm just going to run through some of the more rare orc weapons that I saw, some of the more funny ones, and if you want to check them out for yourself, feel free. But we have squig catapults, a rivet cannon, that's a rivet cannon, a snaz gun, that's S-N-A-Z-Z gun, a grot bomb, which is probably exactly what it sounds like, a grot or Gretchen with a bomb strapped to it, a mech special, which from my understanding is like a Gatling gun, and then there's a lot more after that, all with equally as insane names as the snaz gun, and they're all fantastic. And they're wacky as shit, and I just love them. Just love them. Now, I've talked about orc weapons, and I've mentioned orc mega armor, right? Well, that's basically the only armor you're really going to see orcs wear as mega armor. They don't typically wear, like, individual body armor, per se. Basically, if they do have armor on, it's because they think it looks flashy. But otherwise, like, they do not wear armor at all. And honestly, the only reason why they wear mega armor is because it enhances their strength. Now, I know they have, like, they'll do, like, shoulder pads and stuff. But that's basically it. Like, as far as, like, you know, regular-ass body armor, like an Imperial Guard trooper with flak armor or carapace, that's not really a thing with orcs. They don't really do armor at all. Very, very rarely. Right. So, on to probably well, I mean, I don't know, I love all this stuff, but the next section is going to be just orc vehicles. Now, this is specifically planetary vehicles. I'm not going to cover starships because, honestly, it'd be a huge extra section, and I'm already kind of worried this is going to hit the 3.5 hour mark, like the last one I did. So, starships are not going to be talked about much. They do exist. They're basically the same as everything else in the fact they're ramshackle as fuck. There's no standardization, but they do have specific names for them, like a kill cruiser. You know, it's a cruiser. And there's different variations within that. The Vics are ridiculous. Yeah. The vehicles are nuts. So, and this is going to be kind of a quick section. Not quick, but not as in-depth with some of the more common stuff, because really, like, there's not a lot of stuff that you need to go into. So the most common vehicles that you'll see with orcs are war bikes, war buggies, war tracks, which is a half track, and war trucks. That's trucks with a TRUKKS. And they're exactly what they sound like, except for the war tracks. Those are half tracks. They're so like a war bike is generally single passenger, super fast motorcycle made of scrap. Designed for fast assault. War buggies, which are the next step up from that, it's a driver and a gunner, usually with like a heavy squad support weapon, like a big Shuta or something along those lines. Then a war track. The half track is a troop transport and will also have some sort of squad support weapon on top, if I'm remembering correctly. I think there's also other variants that, like they might have a mortar variant and some other stuff that I'm not thinking of. But yeah, think of like a German half track and all the weird shit that they did with that, and that's what orcs do. They do that with their war tracks. And then you have war trucks, which are exactly, they sound like they're big trucks. They will also, they're mainly used as troop transports, bigger troop transports, and then they also will instead put heavier weapons on them. Like flak cannons, artillery pieces, mortars, whatever. Just basically bigger versions of the war track. Blech. So those ones, like I said, there's not a whole lot of point to go into a huge amount of detail into each one because they sound exactly like what they are. Yeah. So then after that, we have the Ork battle wagons. Now, unlike the other ones, like the war bike, the name doesn't exactly fit with what it is. So when an Ork battle wagon is essentially a mainline assault tank, and they have just an insane amount of variations. They can have tracks, they can have wheels, they can be a half track. But the one thing that makes a battle wagon is a few different things. One, they have a large amount of weapons. A large amount of large weapons, for that matter. Thick armor, like really thick armor. Again, this is a main battle tank. It's going to have a shit ton of armor. Then some of them will have death rollers, which are like, it sounds like some shit out of Looney Tunes. They're big steamroller wheels mounted on the front of these tanks. And they will do with them exactly what you think they will do with them. And rams. They also can double as a troop transport. They'll haul like mobs of boys into battles as like mechanized assault units. So it's like it's nuts. It's a mainline assault tank that's also a troop carrier. So yeah, battle wagons are crazy. That's the thing with like one of the biggest draws to like just orc stuff in general is, and especially on like the tabletop stuff, is you can just about give an orc anything from another miniature, and it's fine. Like, yeah, it's fantastic. I don't know if that's exactly in the rules anymore, but I know that was a running gag. It's like, you know, you keep like odd bits of stuff around, like weapons from, you know, different boxes that you're never going to use, and you're like, oh, I'll give it to my orcs. Like you'll find a place for it in an orc army. It's great. So, in the spirit of orc scavenging or looting, they will also to make them, you know, properly orky. They have to be properly orky. If they're not, then no good. But after they make them orky, they will then reuse them. For example, Leman Russ tanks, chimeras, basilisks, anything. Any Imperial vehicle, any vehicle that is in enough shape that they can reuse it, they will reuse it. And if they can't, they will break it down into its base components and use that instead. They are prolific scavengers. They will scrap everything and use it. Like everything. And they will strip battlefields clean of shit. Like that's another big thing, is they like to loot. So it's pretty great. Now, on to the really fun stuff. So orcs do in fact have their own walking, clanking abominations that cover kind of a wide range of sizes. And I mentioned one earlier, and it's the smallest of them all. It's called a Killakan, Killakan, Killakan. Now, by orc standards, they're lightly armored bipedal walkers that are still pretty fast, and they're usually with a variety of weapons. Most of the time, it's close quarters weaponry, like a large buzzsaw at the end of a robotic arm, or a scorcha on like an arm. And some of them, they are so dumb. And some of them are outfitted with rocket launches. However, where like say a battle wagon, you get into the seat and you drive it, or a war bike, you get on the bike and ride it. Well, a Kilikon is more of a cyborg, kind of similar to a Space Marine dreadnought, except it's a Gretchen surgically grafted into the Kilikon as the control mechanism. It is an extremely brutal and painful process, so much that it turns this Grot or Gretchen like insanely violent and brutal. Which is fine for orcs, they don't care. But yeah, it's effectively it's a dreadnought for Gretchen, which I honestly didn't know that until recently. I knew what Kilikons were, like overall. I had no idea they surgically grafted Gretchen into them, which is just hilarious. Now, they do also have one that fits like full-size orcs, and it's called a Deff Dread, Deffdredd. Same concept, except this is more in line with like a Space Marine dreadnought. It's Kilikans with a K. Oh yeah, you're right. But yeah, so they have Deff Dreads, which are closer to Space Marine dreadnoughts. They have heavier armor. They have 4 weaponized arms. And like I said, instead of a Gretchen or a Grot surgically implanted into it, it's an Ork. While they are loud and extremely destructive, most orcs don't actually want to be put into a dread because that basically just like kills their chances of advancement. Like, you can't be implanted into a dread and then be a war boss. Like, when you're in a dread, that's it. You're a dread. That's all you do. And so because of this, it drives them insane. Because the inability to even have a chance of progressing, of exerting that desire in the orc psyche, it breaks them. They're insane, and so they're very killy. Now, these are the small war machines, right? So this is where it gets really fun. So now we're gonna talk about Gargants. Now, Gargants are basically Ork Titans. To put it very, very simply, they're effectively Ork Titans. Now, there's no, again, this is the Orks, there's no standardization. Basically, when an Ork knows it's a Gargant, they call it a Gargant. There are smaller versions that they call Stampas, but they are still considered a variant of a Gargant. Not only are these like incredible weapons or vehicles of destruction, they are also idols to the Ork gods Gork and Mork. And what's really fun is how they're built. So big mechs receive a vision from either of the 2 Ork gods, Gork or Mork, telling them that they need to bring this thing to life. This in the medium of thick armor, big smoke belching engines, and just a shit ton of guns of various types. More Daka, more Beta. So the literally they have a religious experience that tells them to build this giant death machine, and then they build it. Now the flip side to that, or not the flip side, but in addition to that, so when a Gargant starts being built, that's how you know that an Ork Wa is coming, because there's enough Wa energy that the mech boy has his vision, and the Gestalt psychic. Yes, there's also Morkanauts and Gorkanauts, which are basically they're crafted more for a specific Ork god. But they're still Gargants. They're just Morkanauts or Gorkanauts. Oh, yeah, other variants are sometimes referred to as, yeah. I was just going to say that. No. But that's how you know an Ork Wa is about to start, is they're building Gargants, because the Wa energy has hit such a mass that it can sustain these giant constructs that, under normal rules of physics, would not work. They'd collapse in on themselves, or they would not move. So the Wa energy is essential to these giant war machines being built and functioning. But it's why that is such a clear sign that they're about to go to war, because they can build these things. And these things are huge. I believe they run about the same size. They can range between the size of a Warhound Titan and a Reaver Titan, if I'm remembering right, which is pretty fucking big. Now, of course, so you have your Gorkanauts, your Morkanauts, you have your Gargants. Well, I mean, is that it? That can't be it, right? These are Orks. Well, of course that's not it. You have to have a Mega Gargant, which are, size-wise, about the same size as an Emperor-class Titan or an Imperator Titan. They're huge. Now, where the difference is that they're not actually walkers, typically. They're usually set on like huge tracks, like tank treads, huge. And they're closer to like a mobile fortress than they are a walker. Although I guess you could say that about an Emperor class Titan, but they actually still have legs and walk, but whatever. But anyway, they're a mobile fortress, and they are massive. They're just huge fucking slabs of metal covered in guns, and all they do is just wreck shit. Here, let's see if I can... There's actually a picture of one that should go through, that kind of has passed through the slideshow here. I will find it again. Nope. Well, that's a Gargant right there on the left-hand side. This on the left there. And as you can see kind of from the scale, like... Is that supposed to be an Emperor class Titan? I can't tell. But that's essentially a Gargant right there. Now, let's see. Where is that one that I'm looking for? There it is. So this, the guy in the yellow here, that is a Mega Gargant. And that is some classic Warhammer 40k art, by the way. I love it. That is a Mega Gargant. Now, for scale size, that's a regular Gargant in the bottom right corner. So look at the size difference here. And that's an Emperor class Titan. So, yeah, that kind of gives you an idea of what these things look like. Look at all the guns on this shit. It's got claws, like the whole shebang. Yeah, they're huge. They're basically mobile piles of scrap covered in guns. And I love them. Just like everything else, Orky. Now, aside from mechanical vehicles, and I did mention them before when I was talking about squigs, is that they are used as war mounts. And they're actually pretty fantastic war mounts, other than the fact that they might eat their rider if they are hungry enough, or if they just decide to, and you're an orc stupid enough to get in their way. That you'll see those too. Now, I also mentioned these earlier, which are squigoths. And these are gigantic quadrupeds. They'll put armor plates on them. They'll basically use them as giant mounts for like full mobs of boys to ride in the back with heavy armor and yeah, good shit. They do employ field artillery, which they call big guns, and those are traditional artillery. And then they also have large energy weapons called zap guns. And I think if you were looking at the Mega Gargant, there's like the claw, but it had like kind of that spike sticking out with electricity. I think that's a zap gun. It's one of their crazier energy weapons. Yeah. So yeah, Mega Gargants and giant fucking squigoths for vehicles. It's good shit. They also do have aircraft. So you have Defcoptas, which are helicopters, Daka jets, which those are exactly what they sound like. They're the equivalent to a fighter craft. Bombers, which is BOMMERs or BOMMER, and they are Ork bombers. Usually, these guys are outfitted as tactical or strategic bomber craft. And then finally, you have Fighter Bomber, which is your close air support tactical, bomber. So they're kind of a little bit of both. So yeah, it's a very, very surface level review of Ork vehicles. Much like everything else Ork, there is a huge variety out there. Nothing is ever particularly standard other than, the very basic understanding of things. Like, again, a war bike is going to be a two-wheeled, fast, single-person machine with guns on it. Stuff like that. But otherwise, there's nothing standard about their vehicles or their weapons. It's whatever they can throw together, and it works, right? So, I have mentioned this, and it's been mentioned a few different times throughout this, and that's Wa. Like, what is a Wa exactly? Well, it's a few different things. Most commonly, or what you'll hear the most, is it as a war cry for the Orks. It also means like a massive war or invasion, and it's also what they referred to. What their collective psychic power is referred to as Wa energy. So the more Orks you gather, the more Wa energy there is. The more Wa energy is, the better their technology gets. They start building Gargants, they start building starships, all that good stuff. So how it works is that you'll get a single war boss or a warlord who's conquered a bunch of tribes. Conquered a bunch of tribes, and they're all under his banner, right? So now he's going to, once they've reached this kind of critical mass, okay, now they want to go out and find the best scrap they can, the best fight, best war. They're always looking for the next best war. So they decide they're going to go out into the galaxy and find it. So a Wa is a massive invasion, a full-scale planetary migration, and a crusade of pure aggression. So they will take basically the entire population of a planet, all these Orks and Grecian, they'll load them up in starships, and they will just fling them at enemy planets for a fight, just because. They don't care about resources. They don't, for the most part, or taking territory or whatever. They just want to fight. And that's what a Wa is, right? So, excuse me. What also is scary about a Wa, excuse me again, goodness gracious, is so aside from it being like this energy source, or their name for their energy, and these massive wars that they launch, the energy also kind of sends out almost like a psychic resonance within a radius around where the Wa is. So depending on how large it is, it will start calling other Orks to this war, this Wa. So if you don't stop it fast enough, you're just going to have more and more Orks from across the sector or the system or the galaxy all coming to this war to get, because it's a good war, obviously. Like, all these Orks are fighting here? Shit. There must be a good fight going on. But it's more than that. It's not just rumors. It's literally a psychic resonance that Orks will just instinctually feel, depending on how big the war is and how far away. And they'll just naturally start heading for it. So that's why Was are especially scary, because not only is it this massive Ork army that is incredibly hard to kill, that can quickly replenish its losses, it also attracts other Orks in the galaxy towards it. So if you don't crush a walk quickly, you're going to have a lot of problems. So again, as the Wa grows, they're building more Gargants. They're building more battle wagons. They have more Squigoths. Like, their weird boys get stronger. Like, they just get stronger and stronger and stronger the more orcs that you have all fighting in this war, because their collective psychic gestalt stuff is just all coalescing into this huge pool. And yeah, this is why orcs are so feared, despite the fact that they're so barbaric and they're so, relatively speaking, technologically stunted. They're still, like, on their own, orcs could conquer the galaxy if they weren't managed properly. Like, they're not to be fucked with. And so that's great. Inferior? I guess. That inferior could work. But yeah, so Wa is a kind of it's an encompassing thing. Tech-wise, yeah, they are inferior tech-wise. I mean, for example, they have a I'll talk about one of their starships real quick, and actually it's in the section where I talk about my two favorite, most infamous orcs. But they have what's called a ROK, R-O-K. And it's basically they capture an asteroid, seal it, like for atmosphere, strap a shit ton of engines to it and guns, and that's a spaceship. And yeah. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, good shit, man. But Wa energy is like it's there's a lot of layers to it. It's the energy that keeps their weapons working, their vehicles functioning, their big walkers working. It gives the weird boys their power. It acts as like a psychic beacon for other orcs. Yeah, it's nuts. So that's Wa in a very, very general nutshell. So this is the second to last section. We're almost done here. I might almost finish on time. I might not go over too far. We'll see. So this section, I'm going to talk about my favorite orc characters. And I have two. So my first one, and it's honestly like in general, this guy's story is probably my... I'm not going to say it's my most favorite, but it's up there. He's probably easily top 5. Love this character. Goes by the name of Tuska Daemonkilla. He's probably probably one of my top favorite 40k lore tidbits. Is this fun little fella. He's all 10 feet and however many hundreds of pounds of orc that he is. So Tuska was a famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, warlord, and especially famous for taking his trophies. Now, orcs always like to take trophies, but Tuska specifically was like really into getting trophies. And again, orcs do love to find something bigger than themselves to fight and kill to show that they are, how orky they are, how awesome they are. But Tuska took that to the nth degree. Like, he always was looking for something bigger to kill, to take a trophy off of. So one day, our lovely little Tuska was taking a quick trip through the warp on his flagship, the Gorejaw, which is a kill cruiser, which is just a cruiser. As he's cruising through the warp, he gets invaded by a demonic entity. Now, for those who don't know, orc warships don't use Geller fields, which is the field that protects ships that travel through the warp. So they kind of regularly get invaded by daemons, which for every other race is a bad thing. Orcs just see it as in-flight entertainment. I'm not joking. Anyway, so a particularly powerful demonic entity invades Gorejaw, this Tuska's flagship, starts killing his crew, just cutting a swathe through all his boys. When he hears about this, and he gets excited. He's thrilled. Grabs his power claw, goes down below decks, and fights this beast himself. And ends up winning, kills this thing, and adds another trophy to his collection. So after that, old Tuska decides that was a proper scrap. Gathered up all his weird boys, and then used them to bypass the defenses at Cadia to fly into the Eye of Terror itself. Yes, he purposefully bypasses the Cadian Gate to invade Daemon worlds. At this point, he starts calling himself Daemon Killer, and literally invades several Daemon worlds. Holy Terra, yeah. He invades several Daemon worlds, which ironically were all rivals of Khorne, the Blood God. And he's winning. Like, not only is he invading these Daemon worlds, he's successfully invading these Daemon worlds. At least as successfully as a mortal creature can, which is, I mean, whatever. But the fact that it's even considered a success by any standard is insane. So yeah, him and his orcs were winning invasions of Daemon worlds in the fucking Eye of Terror. It's just nuts. I love this guy. But it gets better. So eventually, Tuska, crash lands on a Daemon world governed by Khorne, the Blood God. And this particular world was ruled over a Daemon Prince of Khorne. I believe it's a Bloodthirster. So this war happens, this invasion happens. Tuska finally fights his way up to this Daemon Prince to fight him one-on-one. And of course he's going to lose. Well, as he's about to lose, Tuska's remaining weird boys distracted the prince long enough so Tuska could impale the Daemon Prince between the legs with his power claw. I don't know exactly how that happened or how that works out logistically, but that is what happened. He fucking nutshotted a Daemon Prince. And then died. Right? Oh, but it's not over yet. So Khorne, again, the Blood God, loved this. He absolutely loved this so much that every day at dawn, Tuska is resurrected along with a fresh army of orcs. And every day, Tuska goes to war against endless hordes of bloodthirsters or bloodletters and bloodthirsters. He played the Prince's ego low. Yes, he did. What is this? Oh yeah. Anyway, so yeah, it's just amazing. It's just amazing. Like, basically, Khorne has a snow globe full of orcs that he shakes up every day, so they will go back to killing his daemons, and he loves it. And honestly, like, Tuska's found the orc equivalent of paradise. He gets to fight an endless war every day for eternity. Also, I'm kind of curious what these fucking orcs look like, because they do say that they do still reproduce via spores, which means they're gaining their nutrients from a daemon world, and I'm really curious if that would actually do anything to these guys, but it's not mentioned anywhere. But yeah, an orc in his warband killed well enough and ballsy enough, yes, that's one happy orc, that the Blood God is like, you know what? I'm going to keep this guy around forever. He's great. Oh, man. Good shit. I love it. All right. So, the last orc I'm going to talk about. Really, probably the most recognizable name in 40k as far as orcs. If you have any knowledge of orcs whatsoever, you probably know exactly who I'm gonna mention. And that is Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka. Now, despite what some idiots say, his name is not based off of Margaret Thatcher. That's a thing that likes to get passed around a lot. It has been confirmed by several different creators of 40k that is not who he was named after. So if anybody tells you that, they don't know what they're talking about. It's not true. Anyway, moving on. So as I said, Ghazghkull is probably the most famous or infamous orc warlord, aside from the Beast. And there's the whole War of the Beast, or the Olenor Crusade too. There's also that whole thing. But of all orcs, his name is probably the one that is the most recognizable. Oh, we're about to hit ad in 5 seconds. Anyway, but yeah, he is also he's at least the only orc that I've ever heard of that has acknowledged a human as being a worthy rival, and that rival is actually somebody I talked about in my last one, Commissar Sebastian Yurick, which if you want to hear more about that, go ahead and check out my other stream. Like I said, it's up on our YouTube channel, which I can actually post the link to here real quick. There it is. Boom. So yeah, if you want to catch my last lore stream, it's all about commissars, and I have a section actually where I talk about Sebastian Yurick. Fantastic character. Ghazghkull is too. But anyway, so Ghazghkull has a lot of lore that goes in with him. I'm covering like just the again, like most of this lore rant is going to be just a very generalized overview. But so Ghazghkull, he actually, as like all other war bosses, he started out as like a regular orc boy, and was shot in the head with a bolter, and which blew a good chunk of his brains out, and he survived. So there's that whole thing. He actually was hurted. He survives, right? Gets up. He's holding what remains of his brains in his hands, in his skull, and is guided by his tribe to Mad Doc Grotsnick, and was sold to him to use in his experiments for 3 teeth and a new choppa. Now, of course, Grotsnick is a Mad Doc, and as I've said with Pain Boys and Mad Docs, what do they like to do with their patients, quote unquote? Experimental surgery. So, what Grotsnick did is he just decided to jam in a bunch of sparky bits, wires, pieces of metal, fuses, whatever. And to keep it all in place, he rivets an adamantium plate to Ghazghkull's skull. And he lives. This works, because of course it does. It's orc technology. They just will slam the coils of Nikola Tesla into your brain and bolt it into a place with a big metal plate. And suddenly you have a working brain again, because orcs. Now where it gets different is Ghazghkull started having visions of Gork and Mork, like direct contact with the orc gods. And they're telling him, yay, you're back. They're telling him that he needs to, he's going to lead the orcs to, the biggest war, the best war ever, if he listens to them. So he becomes the prophet, or he says he's the prophet of Gork and Mork. Which, I mean, for what we know, he very well could be. And so with all these visions, he unites all the orcs on this planet called Urk, U-R-K, under his banner. Now, this planet was lost in the warp for a while, so while all this is going on, the Imperium can't do anything about it because they're obscured by warp storms, whereas before they were kind of managing them. So that's how Ghazghkull is able to unite this planet and get this huge, war host going. Now, after he does this, they reappear back in the Materium, and Ghazghkull gets another vision, and he's shown Urk being destroyed, because I can't remember the sun goes supernova or something else happens, but it destroys the planet. So before that happens, he tells all his orcs that they need to start just building spaceships. They build spaceships, they capture asteroids and turn those into spaceships. They actually even grab a Space Hulk which again I explained very briefly what they are. They're basically wrecked starships and asteroids that kind of get jammed together in the warp. And so because they don't have a Geller field, they kind of will phase into each other, and then when they pop back into the material realm, or materium, they are like permanently fused together, and like these are massive. Like they're basically the size of small planetoids. They're huge, some of them anyway. But they capture a space Hulk and load up a ton of orcs on that, and then just before the planet is destroyed, they all disappear into the warp. Now, after they disappear into the warp, they then, sometime later, and it's hard to say with the warp because that's a whole other thing, and I don't want to get into warp dynamics because we'll be here all fucking night, and I don't have the time. Anyway, so they pop into the warp, some time happens, and then they appear around a little-known world called Armageddon. Joking. And he kicks off the Second War of Armageddon. And this is where he met and fought Yorick and acknowledged him as his rival. Now, his favorite means of planetary invasion is to take the rocks, the ROKs, so that's the asteroid turned spaceships, filled with orcs, and then he crashed them into the planet as far as forms of invasion, like planetary invasion craft. So instead of landing, thousands of little spaceships, he just slams an asteroid full of orcs into the planet. And, it worked. For the orcs that survived, there's a lot of them still. Yeah, pretty great. But yeah, so that's his, probably where he gets a lot of his fame, is the Second War of Armageddon. And actually, in my last one, I go through the whole long. There's a whole long monologue about Yorick that's pretty fantastic. Anyway, so to wrap up Ghazghkull, I'm gonna say a quote from Yorick himself. He was an avalanche from an unexpected quarter. He was a thunderbolt from a clear sky. That was his comment on Ghazghkull. So to finish it up, and probably gonna finish right on time. That's awesome. I wrote exactly enough that I need. Yes, so to finish it up, I want to talk about, just in general, why I love orcs. And I've kind of touched on it throughout this whole thing. But I do love, really I love all the 40k factions to some degree or another. I do. But orcs specifically, why I love them, it's kind of hard to put into words. Like, they just kind of hit this part of my brain that leaves like a little warm feeling inside. Like, they are brutal monsters. They do practice slavery. They will slaughter everything, and like violence is their primary means of communication. They are grimdark. They fit into 40k beautifully. And at the same time, they have this really interesting gestalt psychic like aura or ability, whatever you want to call it, that just adds like some depth to the species in general. Like again, surface level, you just see these savage monsters. But then underneath it all, you have this weird connectivity that they have, that not only does it just kind of bring them together, but it also is a fundamental like thing that they have to function. Like, from their weaponry to like bringing them all together for fights or for wars, like, the Wa energy is just like, it's really neat. I like how it's kind of this weird like not only are they invading the materium, they're also in a way invading the immaterium, because the more orcs, the stronger Gorgon Mork get, and the more power. Like, it's weird that, or not weird, but I think it's great that there's a subsection of the warp purely because of the orcs, like, and it's only for the orcs, and like, I don't know, it's just fantastic, and I love it. And they just have some of the most off the wall, goofy as fuck weapons, like the warp portal thing that fires snotlings. Like, that thing is just, it's crazy and it's fantastic. Yeah. And then even like the law energy even affects their warlords, because like I was saying, the more orcs that follow a warlord, the larger, like physically larger and stronger this warlord becomes, to a point. Anyway, and it's kind of neat how it just kind of touches so much of these guys, like, and how they function. The other thing that really makes me like them is that they're essentially sentient mushrooms, like warring, hyper violent, monstrous mushrooms. They reproduce. They reproduce via spore. You almost can't get rid of them once they've been on a planet. Like, it's almost impossible to get rid of these guys, because once they're there, the spores are released. They will flow off in the breeze. They'll grow someplace and drop more spores and grow more of their ecosystem and drop more spores. And it's there. Like, literally, it's said that short of a planet that's been subjected to exterminatus, like, once you've had orcs hit a planet, they're there forever. They never go away. You can kill every single last orc on that planet, and in some amount of time, more of them will come out of the mountains or the forests or the jungles or the swamps or wherever these assholes are growing and come to fuck up your shit. And it's great. Yet despite all this savageness and the barbarity, they actually have a weirdly functional society for what it is. Like, it's chaotic for sure. Like, power structures, like who is in charge, whatever, changes frequently. But in terms of like smoothness of function, like the fact that two tribes can go to war and the losing tribe will just like almost seamlessly integrate into the winning tribe. Like, that's not something you could do with humans, right? Like, that's not possible. But this hyper violent, hyper warlike species will naturally integrate with their victors. And it makes complete sense within the orc psyche and the way that they're built for that to happen. And I love that a lot. And out of all species in the 40k universe, they are the only ones who are genuinely happy to be there. Like, they love that universe. Everybody else is just miserable. It's fucking awful. Everybody's dying all the time. And the orcs are the only ones that are actually thrilled to be there. Like, seriously love it. And it's because all they want to do is fight. They want a ton of DACA, they want a good choppa, and they want some get to crump and a proper scrap. Like, that's all they care about. And it's just, I don't know, it's great. Like, I love that they fit into 40k so well. They have a little bit of whimsicalness to them, a little bit of humor, but it all, to me anyway, it all fits very nicely within the fabric of the setting and the universe in general. So I absolutely adore orcs. Yeah. Anyway, so 2 minutes early, surprisingly. That's all I have on orcs right now. Hell yeah, orcs for the wins. You right. I love them. I really do. They're great, top to bottom. I love them immensely. Now I didn't see any questions, which is fine. If you do end up having any in the future, I do like answering lore questions. You can find me on Twitter, Mr. Antihero1. My display name is Warmaster, and I use, you should recognize my avatar. It's floating up in the screen there in the upper left. So if you have any questions, feel free to come find one of my posts. Land to shoot me a question about 40k as long as it's an appropriate post. And I will, generally speaking, as long as I see it, I'm happy to answer it, because yeah, looking forward for the Angron versus Gazgul. So I'll cover that real fast, and then I'm going to go because it's 11 and I'm tired. But so what this guy's talking about here is, so Yerick is Gazgul's rival, right? And there was a page, I think it was a codex, but anyway, it was an obituary for Yerick. Like, Yerick died, and in it, they don't say how he died, if I'm recalling correctly. And so one of the fan theories, or one of the fan community I don't know if they say it's a theory or like just kind of like a fan fiction or whatever, is that Angron came back to Armageddon to invade and kills Yarick. And so this pisses off Gazkul because Gazkul wanted to kill Yarick. Gazkul is, Yarick is Gazkul's rival. And so Angron killing Yarick took away Gazkul's rival, and it enrages him, and so he launches the fan fiction is that he launches a war against Angron specifically, and 1v1s him, and it's a pretty fun community thing right now. I think it'd be really cool if Games Workshop did go through with that. It'd be kind of an interesting thing, or it'd be definitely an interesting and fun thing. Will they? I have no idea. We'll see. It was a theory. Geo would confirm might be in the next arc in the Black Larry for the Orks. Really? Okay, that's pretty cool. If that's what they do, I'm gonna be ecstatic. That'll be fantastic. I will definitely have to keep an eye out for that shit. Because when somebody proposed that or mentioned it before, I was stoked. I was like, that is a fantastic idea. I hope they do it. So they are working on the details right now. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good. I hope they do a good job with it. So I'm fine with them taking time to work out details and stuff like that. But that's awesome. If they pull that off correctly, like I'll be ecstatic for sure. But anyway, thank you for joining me tonight on the second episode of Loreman. As I said, I posted a link to it, the VOD for this. They're setting the plot up. Yeah, that makes sense. But anyway, as I said, if you want to catch the VOD, both this one and my last one are up on our YouTube channel. Check them out whenever you want to, if you feel like it. And as far as our streaming schedule for the rest of this week, Wednesday, it should be Pig and I again. Z, unfortunately, got stuck in California for another week due to the wheels or something falling off on his plane as he was boarding. So he had to stay another week. But he should be back with us next week. And yeah, as far as the rest of our schedule this week, I believe Pig is also doing Stationeers tomorrow and possibly Thursday. And maybe even Saturday. I'm not entirely sure. I think that's what he does. At least Tuesday and Saturday he'll do something. And then after that will be Monday, which will be me again. Won't be another lore stream because I do those every other week, or I'm going to try to. Because they do take a lot of planning on my part. Like I said, 15 pages of notes. So every other week. And but anyway, next Monday, I'm not sure what I'll be playing yet. I might go back to Baldur's Gate 3, because that's what I was originally doing. And you guys are supposed to bully me into finishing the game. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But anyway, next time you'll see me will be Wednesday. And if you like Stationeers, find Pig tomorrow. Alrighty, folks. Thanks for coming out.